Okay, okay. Well, I think the clock has ticked past 25 past three here in Sydney, at least. So I'll very happy to start the final session of today's meeting. So this has got titled the Grand Debate, which, as Ralph mentioned in the introduction, at the time it was sort of in the US election campaign was underway, and we were seeing all those presidential debates, and we thought, oh, that's a good idea for a session. What can possibly go wrong? Since then, you kind of look at the US and go, well, maybe that's not the best model for everything, and perhaps we should model this a little bit more on sort of hard chat or something like that. So it's hopefully a friendly debate and certainly a discussion as to all aspects of instrumentation. And we've got two great facility managers, users, experts in their fields to help us have this conversation. And we certainly encourage all of you to play along as well in the chat function, adding in your comments, whether you agree or disagree. Who knows, maybe we can get a kind of an orbiometer and find out whether that's the best of all things of all times. But anyway, so yeah, chip in with your comments in the chat, and I'll just introduce the first of our two conversationists and debaters for today. So we have Owen Duncan, who's been a research scientist since 2009. He's worked across many different species and technologies. He completed his PhD in 2012 under the supervision of Professors Lister and Whelan at UWA. And at the time then, he was focusing on membrane proteins and looking at the Affymatrix chip technology, the microarray platform. And that's what got him hooked on big data, but also led him in search of how can we do big data better. And that led him to mass spectrometry and proteomics and subcellular fractionation, particularly in Arabidopterus. And so he's been a real advocate of proteomics and plant science ever since. And this has led him in 2017 to publish the first wheat proteome map and the associated database at wheatproteome.org. And has been tangling with the messy field of proteogenomics, which I doff my cap to. It's a challenging area for sure. And that's not a big enough challenge, so he's gone on to look into the use of stable isotopes and tackling that very tricky question. You know, we all busily measure, or certainly in our labs, we busily spend our time measuring protein abundance, but protein turnover is one of the first, is one of those really great challenges that people tend to ignore. And so, yeah, so he, since 2019, has established the University of Western Australian Proteomics Facility under the directorship of Harvey Miller. And so he's hoping to bring protein turnover to the nation going forward. So a big welcome to Owen Duncan. And
thanks so much for that, Ben.
Staying on this link of Harvey Miller, he seems to control all things. So Adam Carroll, our second protagonist for today, started his love affair with mass spectrometry back in 2005, and he did a PhD with Harvey at Western Australia University, which he was awarded in 2010. And he's not only got hooked on mass spectrometry for proteomics, but also got into the whole metabolomics side very early on, and as well as also the software development question, which is always, I think, still lagging behind in metabolomics. So a real pioneer in those areas. And so Adam moved to ANU and set up their first GCMS facility, primarily for metabolomics, which he coupled with next generation sequencing to use for the hunt of novel genes and novel metabolites in the plant photorespiration area. Since 2017, Adam has been the manager of the Joint Mass Spectrometry Facility at ANU, and he continues to use that to provide training, support, as well as hardware and software tools for cutting-edge mass spectrometry. So welcome to Adam.
Thanks, man.
So, gentlemen, I'd like to start today's questions. I'll start with Owen. What's the oldest instrument that you've ever used?
It might be the same answer for Adam because we came from the same place at a similar time. That was an AB SciAx Q-Star that lived in the basement for a long time. That was an instrument that I saw in my honours year at university and was masterfully run by Josh Hazelwood for a long time, who's now at Uni Melbourne. That instrument, it sat around for a long time and it was used well and it performed for a long time. It had this awesome cabinet where you could open it up and you could see, these racked modules of all the different, voltage generators and timing things. It was a cool instrument, and it continued on for a while, and it still lives a life. Actually, it's been parted out and turned into a TOF PES or a photoelectron spectroscopy instrument, which is built by Duncan Wild, still going on at UWA.
Wow, so it's still going to this day.
Yeah, can I do a screen share?
If you can, the kind of green button down the bottom in the middle. You have
too complicated.
Well, I'm sure we've all got well, I certainly have a very fond spot for Q-Stars as a platform. We had one for many a year and shed a tear when it finally had a catastrophic turbo failure, which was its last.
They're a bit renowned for that. I don't know how many turbos we put into ours, but it was a lot.
So Adam, is that true? Is this your oldest instrument as well?
It was the first instrument, but it wasn't the oldest instrument. The oldest one is a GCMS, just a single quad GCMS, 1998 model. Yeah, so that's still going. That we routinely use that one still in the facility here. They just basically keep on going, those things.
So would you say that's been a Trojan workhorse that's done the same thing its entire career, and yeah, it's so good at it that nothing's replaced it or surpassed it?
Oh, we have other instruments that are GCMS instruments that are more modern and more sensitive that we use for applications where those sort of things are important. But if you just the old ones just used to check synthetic chemistry reaction mixtures to see if people got their product, and sensitivity is usually not an issue. So we can direct them onto that and not take up time on the metabolomics machines. So yeah.
Yeah, so it just keeps plugging away. So
we had a little scare recently with it where the network card that was in it stopped working, and finding a replacement would have been difficult if we had to go to the market, but we found a spare one laying around, so we got it going again.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly a couple of our oldest instruments have all gone the way where you have the labs that are clinging on to them, and because spare parts aren't available or aren't readily available, they'll either buy it up or come and pilfer parts off anything that you're disposing of, just as where people use those very vintage mass spectrometers limping along, as it were.
Yep.
So I was going to say, so Aaron, with you were mentioning with your Q-Star, so you did teach that a new trick as a way of giving it a new lease of life?
Look, I didn't do it personally. It was quite a new trick. I do have the screen share here. Here we go. If you can see this. This is it in its, can you see that screen share? This is it in its current incantation.
Down to it.
They took the top tube off it and some turbos and things, I think, and turned it into this thing. This has got lasers in it. It's got cameras in it. You fire in reaction mix in one end and you shoot it with a laser and try to capture reaction intermediates. It's crossover between physics and chemistry, I guess. It's a pretty cool machine. That's Duncan Wild's lab there.
Yeah, no, that's a real Frankenstein. It lives.
Yeah, so you can definitely teach an old machine new tricks. That's an extreme example. But I guess a lot of our proteomics instruments, we gently transition over to being metabolite instruments over time. We've got a number of QTOFs that have been transitioned to metabolite instruments, some triple quads, and that flow, I guess, has been very successful. A lot of those instruments get a new breath of life that way. And it's nice to have
it's quite an instrument-intensive workflow. Therefore, just kind of brute force number of instruments becomes more critical than any particular performance capability of the instrument.
It can do. Look, it's nice to have a test platform for people to get on and not have someone breathing down their neck saying, you know, this is, you've got to have your sample prepared like this. It's got to be like this. It's got to be like this. I think people learn a lot in that process.
Okay. So a question for Adam. What have you done with some of your older instruments where you can't find an application for them? What, you know,
basically strip all the useful parts off it and chuck it in the bin if it's that old and useless. We've had an instrument, an Agilent QTOF that had a failure of a part that was going to cost about $25,000, the main power supply, and we ended up getting $70,000 back for that, which was from Agilent, which was a pretty good deal. So if it's worth getting some money for it, yeah, we'll try to get some money. But other than that, just, yeah, get everything you can off it, chuck it in the bin.
Wow. So, Owen, have you ever managed to get any hard cash for an old instrument, or not been that lucky?
I guess it's no, to be frank. We've got a number of instruments that are sitting on benches that are probably primed for it. There's at least two that are no longer realistically going to be used in anger again. But we haven't found, I haven't been as creative as Adam, obviously. Like, we should be talking to Agilent about shifting them onto the next time.
Well, I'm just seeing Mel's comment about selling them to a movie set. It does remind me, we had a Voyager, which was certainly one of my all-time favorite instruments. And that got to the end beyond it. I think we lost the power supply, and then we lost a turbo at the same time. And we just couldn't get the parts. And amazingly, we sold it to Ridley Scott. And so somewhere, I haven't had the time to sit and watch Alien Prometheus, but somewhere in the background of that movie are bits of the Voyager. They bought it to use in that, which we got the hard cash. I think we got about 10K for it, I was impressed. But anyway, so sticking with Owen, with a new mass spec, do you feel you should upgrade it every 3 years like a car? You know, is that sell them whilst they're still worth something?
Yeah, look, I always see the advantage in having a new instrument. Everything works better. It's like a new car. It's got that new car smell. Reinvigorates your enthusiasm for the process. All those things keeps you current. I think if you can do it, great. But obviously, budgets. It's Australian taxpayer money. At the end of the day, we have to pay attention to financial responsibility.
You don't ever find it leads to depression amongst the users? I remember Tony Purcell once saying when he had just had some upgrade to the latest QTOF, and the fact that they wiped out in an afternoon would have taken them 6 months previously, because there's just such a jump in performance. The previous, like, why did I waste 6 months? I could have just sat on the beach for 5 months, wait for the new instrument, and be just as productive.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the game, isn't it? It's nice to have a little bit of extra sample prep tucked away in the -80 for when that happens. Yeah.
Adam, where do you sit on the upgrade one? Do you do it every 3 years if you can?
Well, yeah, if we could, I think we've got so many different kinds of instruments, and we have to sort of make sure each application area is well supported with equipment that's good enough for those current standards in the field. So we can't really update every instrument every 3 years, but we can certainly try to get an instrument every couple of years. It's with our schemes, we basically rely on either Leaf or we've got an internal scheme. But if you've just won a big internal grant this year, you're not going to get one the next year. So and Leaf is probably pretty similar. So yeah, I'd say it'd be nice to replace things every 3 years, but it's a bit unrealistic for us.
Yeah. No, very few people have pockets that deep.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at the idea of leasing an instrument as an alternative way of getting that new technology without having to shell out the millions of dollars?
Well, I think it would be expensive. The deals that I've inquired at, it just doesn't really make much sense for something that's going to last potentially a long time. If you buy it one outright, if you hold on to it for the equivalent amount of time, you're going to end up paying through the nose for it. It's never been very attractive.
Have you looked at leasing at all, or your facilities even thinking of that?
Look, the nature of our funding is that we're going for LEAF and we're going for NCRIS. That they're the funding streams, and I haven't tried to put in for. I haven't thought about putting in for a lease rather than a purchase. But I guess you could use that money.
I have, and it's an interesting question. First of all, getting unis agree to be able to lease. You're not going to. Some will agree, some simply won't because it's not in their psyche. There are groups out there, more so in the private space, that they do lease someone on 3-year terms, so that they do make sure that they get the 3-year turnover if they choose to. Saying that, you've got to then make sure you've got the cash flow to be able to support it. But it is, depending on how innovative your uni is and how those are maybe in commercial services, to make it potentially viable is interesting. Certainly from University of Melbourne, when they looked at leasing, the question was, they even asked themselves, the finance group said, hey, we could lease to the groups. That would actually be a more cost effective rather than going to an external leasing company. Nothing's ever happened of it, but I think it posed questions that basically gave up potential options. It is an option. And as for how you could fund it, again, we're NCRIS, so there are ways that you can think around using that, but you've got to put it in your whole of asset model.
Thanks for that. Owen, just actually, I'll switch to Adam. Have you ever benefited from a seed instrument, which is always another interesting way of tapping into new technology?
Yeah, we had a seed Agilent 6490 triple quad, which arrived, dropped, and that was a nice time to have a seed instrument at that point. We hadn't put the money up for that. That had its chassis all bent out of shape and panels everywhere. That was not a pretty scene. And we used that instrument for almost 12 months, I think, or its replacement. And eventually that seed turned into a purchase. So that's how we went on that one. And yeah, it was great to have a new triple quad. I think it had an ion funnel on the front of it, etc., and it got us substantial more depth out of the proteomic samples.
Adam, have you ever managed to?
We've never taken one on, usually because they kind of imply that they expect you to buy it at the end, and we've never been in a position where we've had a bunch of money just sort of sitting around that we could commit to something that they were offering as a seed. Usually, we figure out what we want and then we apply for funding for it, and if we get it, we buy it. But we don't have those kind of situations where we don't know if we want to buy it. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. We've got a big pile of cash and maybe we'll spend it, maybe we won't. It's never like that for us.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of that bit of, you kind of know what you want and you're trying to target that bit. Do you tend to go towards kind of proven technologies, instruments that might have been out a year or two and there's no bugs, or do you get lured by that trip to ASMS and there's something that's two labs have got the beta version of and are showing fine things with, but do you take the plunge on that new technology?
We don't. We try to talk to existing users of the models that we go for, and generally we're not going for the absolute latest thing usually. except recently we got a LEAF grant for an Agilent 7250 GC QTOF, which was one of the first ones in Australia. So there wasn't really much data to go on, but we just kind of trusted Agilent in the GCMS field and the success of the 7200 predecessor. We figured there's probably going to be better rather than worse.
Do you feel that's a way of making the research dollars go a little bit further? Presumably, if it's not the shiniest model, then
yeah, I think like when you're buying a computer, there's a sweet spot in terms of value for money and reliability. You know, if it's you see these series of instruments that are incremental improvements of one another that come out, and you can say, well, that's a mature product line, and it's, you know, if you're not getting the absolute latest thing, you might get a better price for it, and be able to spread yourself out a bit more. Yeah.
cool. So Owen, I mean, where do you sit on the newest, greatest, or proven?
Look, we've always tried to go for the proven, I think, but we've always been swayed into the latest, greatest. I think we had, you know, an early model fusion, which is one of the first tri-bit instruments, and we've just got an Explorers 480, which is, I guess, it's not really a new instrument, right? It's a new line, it's a new name, but proven technology.
I mean, the 480 is quite a big radical rebuild of obviously what's relatively proven technology. They've learned a lot of lessons in that one, but it's still, I always having sometimes had my fingers burnt with the unexpected glitches in a new technology. But have you ever done the one where you get the, you know, you unbox it, you do the acceptance testing or whatever, and then you immediately void the warranty by drilling a hole in the back or doing some crazy aftermarket modification?
I can't wait for that day to happen, but it hasn't happened yet, Ben. I'm looking forward to it. I want to stick that laser in there.
Awesome. Adam, you're quite a tinkerer. Have you ever voided the warranty?
No, generally wait for the warranty to expire before doing anything. We haven't really modified any of the instruments in our lab at that level, like Owen's showing that example with the old Q-Star. But we're quite into making peripheral devices to sort of add value to it that you can't get on the market, that, you know, wouldn't void the warranty.
So what, I mean, is that more on the front ends with the iron sources, or where? What sort of widgets?
Yeah, well, we haven't done it yet, but I'm quite interested in fabricating, like turning some of our old, like once they're out of warranty, the LCMS instruments can be turned into GCMS instruments. So you can basically put an atmospheric pressure GC ionization source on the front of any ESI instrument. So that's something I'd like to do down the track. But something else we've been working on is something to go on the back end of a 2D GC to do 2D GC fraction collection to purify compounds like small molecules with 2D GC. So yeah, we've got a few projects on the boil, but no big examples. Something else I'd like to try and make is an acoustic auto sampler, because that the
So
Echo,
readily available from our good friends at SciEx these days. But,
yeah, so they apparently that system with the Echo MS and the triple quad they put on it is list price is about $1.7 million or something. But if we could come up with a way to make our own sort of acoustic auto sampler to go on the front of you know, a TOF instrument that's fast enough, that'd be pretty neat, because it'd be a lot cheaper.
yeah, definitely. I can remember once back in the days when we had a good workshop building I mean, it wasn't even just modifying a nanospray source, and it was, you know, a few $100s versus thousands to actually buy the same thing commercially. So it can be a very, very cost-effective way of upgrading.
Yeah, we made our own nano column heater. So that to buy those are at least $10,000 or something. But we made ours for about, I don't know, $700 or something, $600. Yeah, that saved us a lot of money. That's pretty simple device.
Yeah, we've certainly spent more modifications on LC systems than we have on mass specs. We've built an auto sampler that interfaces with Agilent systems through an Arduino and those kind of things, those kind of projects that would look at $40,000 if you bought something like that from your manufacturer, and it comes with all the programming sort of stipulations of how they want you to use it. You can break out of those boxes pretty easily with an Arduino and some stepper motors now. I think it's a nice place to be.
Awesome.
Excellent. So moving on to the next question. So I guess, Adam, what's your favorite all-time mass spectrometer?
Well, that we have.
Well, I mean, well, that you've used. So it doesn't even have to be one of your own. You know, if you ducked over to a lab and borrowed someone else's mass spectrometer for a particular experiment.
Well, I'd have to say the best one that in LCMS that I've used is the Fusion, because that's the best Orbitrap we have. And yeah, it's just so versatile, and you know, compared to a lot of LCMSs I've used, very sensitive, and yeah. So for me, that'd probably be the best. But there's a lot of other things out there that I would like to get my hands on.
Absolutely. Owen, and also don't forget, everyone can kind of yell out in the chat section what their favorite instrument is. But yeah, Owen, what's your favorite all-time?
Look, it's 2 votes for a Fusion at this point. That's my favorite instrument as well. I don't know if that's going to be global, but that's my favorite.
Well, they're nice platforms. Sometimes I just quite like, my favorite's the Voyager, just because without wanting to bag out waters. We had another Maldi top instrument at the time that was just nothing but a pain in the ass. And then I went around to a neighboring university and managed to pull my way onto their Voyager. And it's like, a machine where you stick your sample in and you see it. That's always had a soft spot in my heart ever since. But anyway, so it's an interesting changing topic. Maintenance was quite a hot topic in one of the breakout groups I was in this afternoon. And so where do you sit on the great maintenance debate? Are you a self-insurer, or do you just sign up big wadges of cash to the vendors and pay their maintenance contracts?
Is that to me? I'll have a go at that. Yeah, look, we go for service contracts at the moment. Obviously, we have older instruments that start to fall off service contracts, and we tend to get 2 to 3 years out of them, I guess, before they have that terminal sort of decline where there's a board gone and a turbo, as you said before, Ben. You know, you get those kind of double headers, and you lose the enthusiasm, or your budget loses the enthusiasm, I guess. But we've got 3 instruments on service contracts at the moment, and that was all part of the purchase deal, and that was a reasonable way to go for us. But I think Adam's got a better story than me from this one.
Well, before we move to Adam, do you feel you break even on the contracts that you have, or do you think the companies are pocketing some profit?
I think that's for you, Owen.
Oh, was that for me? Sorry, was that Adam or myself?
Yeah. So do you feel you break it? Well, do you think you're ahead on the service contracts, or do you think the companies are ahead?
I mean, the companies are ahead most years, but having that fallback position, it just doesn't work, mate. Can you fix it, please? is a real stress reliever, I guess. But and obviously, some years you replace a turbo, you replace something that might cost you $20,000 or $30,000, and all of a sudden a $50,000 service contract doesn't look so expensive.
Yeah. Adam, what's your view on maintenance contracts?
Whatever service contracts we get, we can only really get those when we buy the instrument. We can negotiate maybe an extra year or 2 with it, because it's pretty much impossible for us to get money from the university to pay for ongoing service contracts after that. And we pretty much just wing it after the service contracts expire. We kind of hope for the best and try to apply a lot of prevention to minimize the need for cure. So we have a lot of strict protocols about, you know, and oversight in terms of what people are running and how they're treating the instruments to try to minimize the stress on them. But there's always going to be just age-related things like turbos and that kind of thing that I mean, we really don't, unfortunately, we don't have a plan. I mean, I've raised this with the powers that be, and they don't really have a good answer for what do we do when something fails that should be fixed in terms of, like, you know, it's not, the instrument's not that old. We should spend the money, but where's the money coming from? I think we're in a position of, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We do rely a lot on our really good workshop team. So we have a very strong mechanical and electronics workshop team. So we've had cases where we had on an old waters instrument that's been around since 2009, so it's well over 10 years old. And a board failed on that, and Waters quoted us $20,000, but then our electronics guys came in, because we'd had a brownout. They kind of had an educated guess that maybe the capacitors got damaged, and they checked a few of them and fixed it for about $10. So, you know, if you've got a good workshop team, I think the risk of going without service contracts is probably worthwhile. We certainly haven't, I've been here for about 4 years or so, and we haven't had any situation where we've had to cross that bridge of something major has failed, we don't have the money, wish we had a service contract. Whereas I do know over at CSIRO, they were paying $100,000 a year for a service contract on with a particular vendor to support like 3 machines, and they were desperate to get off it because they just couldn't see the value. But they wanted to use our workshop as a contingency for, you know, to repair things when they fail. So yeah, I think if you've got a really good workshop, you can, and you're careful with the instruments, you can survive if you've got a bit of luck as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of luck. I remember with some of our older instruments that had got to the off-contract phase, and we had one expensive year, and I thought, well, you know, you have expensive years. And then we had this, the next year was equally expensive, and after that I put it back on contract, and you got a few more years out of it. But it's a delicate balance. Right, so again, sort of moving on from maintenance, do you go with a range of different vendors? So you always try and pick the right tool for the job, or do you stick with one particular manufacturer for reasons of you're familiar with the technology, you know, the service people, etc.?
We pick the best tool for the job. So yeah, you know, it depends on what capability we're looking for, and which we're not locked to a particular vendor. And I think it's good to keep the vendors on their toes by diversifying a bit. Yeah, so generally for GCMS, it'll be Agilent, because I think Agilent make the best GCMS stuff personally. Yeah, but in the LCMS area, we've got Waters, Thermo, yeah, mostly Waters and Thermo, really.
Okay. Owen, how do you go for the mix of different vendors, or are you allegiant to one?
Our current lab, I guess our recent acquisitions have all been Thermo instruments. So I guess from that perspective, but we've previously come from all Agilent instruments. So we've kind of made a transition into all Thermo instruments. But next acquisition sort of round, if we're, fingers crossed, we get another go at it, you know, the timsTOF Pros look pretty good. So there's, yeah, like you're looking at the right instrument at the job, especially if you're advertising services or trying to attract clients. You want to have that shiny instrument that makes people want to use your service, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always amazed that how people sniff out new instruments. I remember once we got one of the kind of first in Australia style platforms, and almost within a week there were people emailing me going, "Oh, I hear you got one of these." So yeah, it can be quite a magnet to have what's popularly perceived as the best. So I mean, obviously we talked a few times about having limited budgets and you can't do everything you aspire to do. Have you ever tried to use one instrument for two divergent workflows where you've just not had enough cash to be able to pick out specialized one?
Yeah, look, the Fusion that we got it was a Leaf bid. It had 5 different applications on it, I think. The leading application was proteomics, but then there was like a petrochemical application and there was a metabolite application and something else as well. And it didn't work out well in that specific circumstance.
You got the funding. The
petrochemical samples were a bit much for the thermo engineers. I think that was tried and not continued. So yeah, we've tried it. I think it could work with metabolites and proteins. Certainly, some of our older instruments we will flip back and forth with a good clean in between. It works. You can do it. I think it probably slightly degrades both workflows, but there you go. If you've got that budget pressure, you can do it.
Excellent. Adam, have you ever tried a two-trick pony?
Oh, absolutely. We've got 10-trick ponies everywhere. Because we're a joint school. We're serving. We're a joint facility, so we're supporting chemists and biologists and the rest of the university. So people come and they have these applications, and we get all kinds of crazy problems to solve, and we don't. Yeah, as much as we'd like to be able to just dedicate a particular instrument to a particular application, it's just not. We wouldn't be able to achieve the same amount of research output that way, and yeah, so we're often doing different things on different things and moving LCs around sometimes, and all kinds of. Yeah, we make do with what we've got.
Cool. Well, as I say, one of the fun questions out of the survey we ran was the fantasy money no object. What would you buy? So what would you go if someone gave you a blank check? What would you buy tomorrow? Yeah, Adam.
I was sort of 50-50 Tim's Top Flex and the latest Lumos.
In a way, you could say, I suppose actually, money no object. You can't buy one of each. But
no, but probably I'd be very keen on the Echo MS, even though it's just on a triple quad. I think the ability to do high throughput screening at that rate would open up a whole new type of research that we'd be able to do.
I mean, does anyone have enough samples for one of those systems?
Well, we have a high throughput robotic facility that they've got knockout lines for every human gene, like just in these cell line libraries and drug screening and synthetic biology stuff that you could do. There's a lot of awesome cutting edge research that you could do if you had that throughput capacity that would only be possible at that kind of rate. So I think that could be a real game changer. It's a little bit boring to me to just get an instrument that's incrementally faster, but essentially does the same thing. I like to try and get something that completely changes the research landscape.
Yeah. Owen, what would you go shopping for if someone showered you with mountains of cash?
Look, I like what Craig Venter did when he stuck a bunch of DNA sequences on a yacht and sailed it around the world. I can see that happening with an eclipse or something on the back of a yacht and doing some water column sampling. That'd be my way.
That does sound like a dream. So when we were designing this debate, someone felt that we should really just ask, cut to the chase. Is a QTOF better than an Orbitrap? where would you sit?
I have a foot in both columns. I don't think it's the mass analyzer that's the critical thing. I think it's the ion trapping and release. You know, I think it's serving up the right dose of ions to the right mass analyzer at the right time. You can make beautiful spectra on a QTOF. You can make beautiful spectra on an Orbitrap. Yeah, I think that if you're generating 7,500 res spectra on an Orbitrap, they look not that good. If you generate very fast spectra on a QTOF, they look not that good. Yeah, so look, I think it's about the trapping. I think that's more an important question to me than the mass analyzer itself.
Okay, Adam, are you going to be equally diplomatic, or are you going to nail your colours to a? To
I wasn't being diplomatic.
But I don't think you can really pick a winner there in terms of Orbitrap versus TOF, because at the moment they've both got pros and cons that for different applications, you know, you would choose a different instrument, and they're both equally important. But if I was on a desert island or on a yacht sailing around doing water column sampling, I'd be definitely in the Orbitrap camp.
Right. Look, I mean, it's that trade-off, isn't it? Like a TOF has this theoretical full bandwidth. Like it can be faster, you would imagine. Whereas an Orbitrap's got to spend that time to circulate those ions around to get the high resolution spectra. Whereas a QTOF can go up bang, 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 right? And I think that you probably have a theoretical higher higher duty cycle on a TOF than you do on an Orbitrap. But we haven't seen that. Well, I haven't had my hands on a timsTOF Pro, but I'd like to see what that does. Yeah.
Very true. Alrighty. Well, so the final question of this one. So I was reading Nature the other day, and apparently AI has got to the stage where all our crystallographers are going to be out of a job because the computers can just predict a crystal structure. What sort of technology? I mean, do you ever see the day that mass spectrometry might be completely redundant and we'll be equally redundant and just sitting on the yacht without the mass spec, or sitting looking at the yachts?
No.
Owen?
Oh, look, part of me dreams of the day when they're all, they're all redundant. This mix of high vacuum and high voltage and spraying liquid into the front of it, like it's just a recipe for disaster, isn't it? And we see the output of that regularly with service contracts, etc. Obviously, there's new technologies on the horizons. Obviously, the big one is being nanopore, etc. It could change things. Who knows? Yeah, it depends if they can unfold those proteins and get a nice confident read off it. Obviously, things like stable isotopes, you're never going to be able to weigh things in a nanopore, but maybe you can make it do it some other way. The future's bright.
All right, so we've all got a job for a little while. Adam, do you think we're going to be joining down at Job Centre soon, or are we safe for a while?
Not in our lifetime. I think we're pretty safe. And prediction's always going to be just that, a prediction. Yeah, I can't see anything beating mass spectrometry for a while.
What do you think about nanopore stuff, Adam? Do you have a thought about that? I don't know if small molecules is realistic. I know proteins, they've got some things, but it's difficult as far as I understand.
Well, as far as I understand, nanopore has pretty high error rate.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, on the minion, etc.
Even for yeah, it's been around for a while. It's just fundamentally error prone. So yeah, I think we're pretty safe from nanopore.
Excellent. Well, I would thank you both, Owen and Adam, for your bravery in standing up for the great debate. And I just now want to open the floor to anyone else if they have any comments or pennies worth they want to share. And so we've had a bit of conversation going on in the chat. If anyone wants to chip in with their all-time favourite instrument, or are we going to be out of a job? Now's your chance.
I don't know if Scott or Jason wants to chip in. I think those guys have some like rental contracts on their instruments.
To be honest,
Thanks for dobbing us in, Owen. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was one commenting about we did a rental, a lease from SciEx for 6 months for an instrument. It was for a specific project, and we just had thousands of samples to put through the one method, just run them all, and that project was done. So and that worked well, right? They come in and install it, maintenance is covered. If it breaks, they come in, fix it, and then they pack it up and take it away. And you don't have to worry about the running of it. It's all there covered. And yeah, we did the project. We put thousands of samples through, got the data, and then said goodbye. And it was cost effective. I mean, we're paying for it ourselves, right? As part of our own research projects and things that we're doing. But yeah, I guess the problem that some of the other people were saying was convincing the higher ups that is a cost effective, useful strategy. But we don't have that problem because we've got our own money. So yeah, that was just our experience. And then the service contracts, we've had times where we've had service contracts kind of on everything, and then times where we haven't. We've just kind of self-insured effectively. And often the times we've self-insured, you don't end up, in 1 year, you don't end up spending as much as you would if you bought service contracts. So, service contracts maybe 50, 60 grand or something for a year. And we looked at the numbers and we only spent, 15,000 or something to fix up the machine during that year. So, but it is a bit of luck, right? If you do get a turbo blowing or something, then you could be in much more bigger trouble. But yeah, it's a tough one because you've got that surety if you've got a service contract, but then do you really get your money's worth? And can you just self-insure? I mean, some of the reasons we have the service contract is because they will respond to you quicker and they will fix it quicker. Than if you were just.
Find that to be the case, because there's always something when you've got the service contract there, and they're saying they'll be there in weeks' time, and the other guys it's months. I mean, did you find when you didn't self-insure that you were waiting longer than?
Yeah, well, we're in WA, so we're used to waiting longer for everything anyway than the rest of you. But yeah, I think you do get further down the queue if you haven't got the service contract. So we're certainly for LCs, we've got our money's worth out of Shimadzu and Agilent. We've got whole modules replaced and things, and that's more like 8 or 10 grand a year, something for an LC service contract, and we've easily got our money back from them because I've easily got a lot more moving parts.
And the LC's busy all the time, and therefore you're wearing them out.
Yeah.
Maybe an academic lab might.
Yeah, maybe, but certainly for just about all of them, we've got our money's worth. Yeah.
The other interesting one of those that put me off the self-insuring bit is you have the good years and the bad years, and our accountants can't cope with that level of information. Do you find that because you've got a bit more autonomy on your finances, that enables you to self-insure better?
Yeah, because you can have a longer-term perspective, right? Rather than year to year, and because we've been around for a while, we've got the data over all these years and what's gone wrong and how much it's cost, right? So we keep track of that. So because we've got that autonomy, that we can make those decisions with a bit more forethought than some bean counter that year to year is holding us under the hammer or something.
Excellent. Anyone else want to?
So has anyone tried any non-cryptic digest with any enzymes on a complex lysate and got similar kind of coverage like trypsin in this group?
We had one group did a combination of cyanogen bromide and trypsin to get better coverage of hydrophobic domains in integral membrane proteins. That seemed to make a big improvement in terms of like the actual protein coverage of the really hydrophobic bits. But that still included trypsin.
That includes trypsin.
but yeah, cyanogen bromide definitely works.
But how did you handle the search part of it?
Just made we introduced the cyanogen bromide enzyme into the MaxQuant list of enzymes, and yeah, there's some modifications that get introduced with that that we had to add in as well to be able to pick up the cyanogen bromide cleaved peptides, but that was quite straightforward to do.
Thanks.
Excellent. Anyone else have a comment they want to share?
There's one question, Ben, from Paul Trim in the chat. It's going back to the service contract or not. The question is, do you risk reducing the life of the instrument with not being on a service contract, or do you perform the same level of PM on each instrument each year? So Owen, Adam, I don't know if you want to address this, or anyone on the floor.
Owen, do you want to tackle that one? Or?
I can have a crack at it. Inherently, I think when you're off contract, the instrument's life is reduced because you hit those problems where you've got something too expensive to fix. In terms of a PM making an instrument live longer, I mean, it depends on what someone does in a PM. Usually at max, it's going back to a quad, and after that, it's like if there's something really broken, you might go there. I don't think those things, if you're cleaning, you know, if you're taking apart the source and cleaning the quad and the early optics, I don't see what would really change in terms of an instrument's lifespan. I don't know what other ideas are out there.
Adam?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Owen there. I mean, you can try to get the sort of performance area under the curve higher by doing routine maintenance more frequently. If you're capable of doing those PMs yourself, you can save a lot of money by not sort of getting the benefit of the PMs without having to pay for the service contract. But is it going to change the absolute life of the instrument? Probably not, but you'll probably get more value out of the instrument while you do have it. But a lot of those, like there's not much you can do to lengthen it, to extend the life of a quad. It's going to go and it's going to go, I think, regardless of how clean the front end is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think certainly in our experience, it's the contract or no contract doesn't make a big difference. It's the level of use and the type of user that has the biggest impact on an instrument's uptime. So, yeah, as Mapdu has just said in the chat, everything gets dirty eventually, which is certainly true. Right. Anyone else want to chip in before we finish off today's session?
Also, are there people who experience PEG contamination once in a while, and how do you deal with it as far as column is concerned?
And Adam, do you want to?
Yeah, we've definitely had cases of bad contamination here and there. Sometimes, like, because we run a lot of synthetic chemistry samples, you know, there's so many different types of materials coming through, and occasionally we get something that's really sticky. Like, watch out for triphenylphosphine oxide or triphenylphosphine, because you just run it once, not at necessarily really high concentrations or anything, but it just sticks to absolutely everything and takes a long time to flush it out. So we've had some instances with things like that that are a bit frustrating when they happen. We've also had people getting their concentrations out by a couple of orders of magnitude or something, and for proteins, and then it's like everyone after that just sees that this same protein. So yeah, we try to really make sure that people are aware of the implications of these sorts of things and make sure they know what can go into the mass spec and what can't. But it certainly happens from time to time. Yeah,
we've had issues with tributylamine in LCs in the past. That certainly sticks in places and just comes out over a long period of time. But in terms, if you can isolate it to the LC or the MS, I mean, I'm a big fan of getting just a hot tap, as hot as you can possibly get, and sticking the front end bits under it. If you've got something sticking around, that can do a good job.
Excellent. Well, I think as we're nearly out of time, we'll again thank Owen and Adam for their bravery in standing up to be the debaters. A virtual clap to them.
Thank you for listening to us, everyone.
And yeah, no, so I just wanted to give a particularly big shout out to Melanie White, who's managed to get us into and out of breakout rooms and onto jam boards and do way more technology than I certainly would have been capable for today's event. And thank you all for attending. I've got had a great turnout for what a meeting that was announced at very short notice, really. And I certainly want to pass on my thanks to Ralph for helping make this happen. We've been bouncing ideas back and forth for much of this year. So, Ralph, do you have any closing comments you want to add?
No, not much, Adam, and thanks so much for attending. As I said in the beginning, it is just great to see that the number of attendees just, goes up or stays constant and doesn't go down. So thanks so much for your support and for attending this meeting, taking time out of your busy schedule. And Ben and I, we hopefully make the best out of it and think about the initiative, and we hopefully come up with the fourth one. And so when is it scheduled, Ben? Can we already... Is it end of this year or is it beginning?
Yeah, so we're hoping to do a satellite meeting with the ASMUS meeting, which I believe is scheduled for November. I don't know whether Adam can give us a live update on that progress.
Yeah, yep. So the ASMUS committee has agreed on the dates. So that's better get this right. I think it's the 21st to the 25th of November. Basically, yeah. 99% sure that's right. So yeah, I've got to start working with the organizer to get the website ready and start advertising it. But yeah, if you want to come to ANZMUS in Canberra, keep your late November open around that time. We deliberately set the dates to be after the latest exam finishing dates that we could find across the university. So teaching and exams should be all finished by then. Yeah, so please come down, it'll be great.
Awesome. I look forward to it. And I think we've got a busy year ahead of ourselves with hopefully another round of surveys. And given the previous session, we're going to keep ourselves very busy with multi-center testing. So hopefully we'll have a lot to discuss down in Canberra.
Yeah, and also Matt just said, it's probably a good point, we need to have a virtual component of this meeting as an ongoing thing. And I probably agree, this is, not everyone can make it to lawn or, so I think it's really good if we can keep this, virtual at least to some extent, in case, for those who can't travel. It would be good to keep this up.
Yeah, absolutely.